Hey everyone, it's Emily, and it's kind of a weird time to be a physical Nintendo Switch collector. I think despite all the support we've been seeing for game key cards by third-party publishers and developers over on the Switch 2, a lot of us were still happy to have true physicals on the Switch 1 for those games. And I think things may have soured a bit with a lot of these third-party developers and publishers announcing that they would not be supporting upgrades from the Switch 1 to Switch 2 versions. Meaning that if you decide to go the physical media approach and buy the Switch 1 version of these games, you're not going to have an ability to upgrade to the Switch 2 version of that game if you were to insert it into a Switch 2 and maybe pay some sort of fee for that upgrade path. Instead, you'll just be kind of basically stretching that Switch 1 version onto the Switch 2, which kind of has its pros and cons. For example, Atlas released Raito Remastered, both a true physical Switch 1 version and a game key card for the Switch 2, but they did not provide any sort of upgrade path for those who bought the Switch 1 version. Now, there's been plenty of extensive tests on Raito Remastered and how well it performs both on the Switch 1 and the Switch 1 version on the Switch 2 compared to the native Switch 2 version. And overall, a lot of people are saying that it's not too bad that there's no sort of upgrade path, and you can kind of get by despite the resolution being locked at 720p for the Switch 1 version, and it's being stretched to 1080p if you are planning to play it on the Switch 2. And in doing that, it's kind of blurry. And the other thing you lose is you don't have that stable 60 frames per second that the native Switch 2 version has. Instead, you are kind of locked to 30 to 60 frames per second, which is, I hear it's not too bad on the Switch 2, but if you are someone who is very sensitive to frame dropping, it's probably going to be somewhat noticeable because Raito Remastered is an action RPG. So far, we only have Raito Remastered as kind of a benchmark to get an idea of how this no upgrade path really works from the Switch 1 to Switch 2 version. But there are quite a number of games coming out later this year that are also advertising that there's no upgrade path between the Switch 1 and Switch 2 version, including the newest entry in the the Somni Files series, No Sleep for Kaname Date, which is a narrative adventure game that incorporates a lot of puzzles. And while the previous the Somni Files were on the Switch 1, they were never the best way to play them, just due to graphical issues and performance. And so there is a bit of a worry that the Switch 1 versions will kind of behave the same, if not worse, if it's not optimized for the Switch 1 system at all. That's coming out later this month, so we'll have to see how it measures up. But most recently, the no upgrade path announcement for Dragon Quest I/II HD 2D Remake has also made quite a splash and has made a lot of fans torn about which version to get. Do you opt for the Switch 1 version that is a true physical but may have some sort of graphical or performance issues, kind of similar to what we saw with Dragon Quest III HD 2D? Or do you go with the native Switch 2 version, which is either digital or a game key card, and kind of forego the physical media option altogether? I think many collectors, including myself, kind of see that digital route or the game key card route as very undesirable and kind of looking towards other systems to potentially buy these games on instead of the Switch, which is a little bit sad given, I think, how many of us really enjoyed collecting for the Switch 1 and just have very extensive libraries on the Switch 1 that you'd like to continue to see growing or be adopted into your Switch 2 collection. The main excuse I've been seeing these third-party publishers make regarding why there's no upgrade path between Switch 1 and Switch 2 versions of their new games is that the two versions are separate builds, and it's impossible for the Switch 1 version to be enhanced and upgraded to the native Switch 2 version. Now, I'm not sure I totally buy this. It seems a little bit odd that developers would make two entirely separate versions of these Switch games, especially if maybe they already had a Switch 1 build made. Why wouldn't they have upgraded that to a Switch 2 version later on? If that were the case, why make a whole new version? I'm still a bit puzzled, but this is apparently what we've been told for why there are no upgrade paths available for many of these games. So as someone who really enjoys physical media and kind of just sees digital games as more of a rental that I'd rather have on PC than on consoles, I'm also very torn about the situation. The current state of physical media in general, not just with Nintendo, but other platforms as well, has somewhat soured me a little bit when it comes to collecting modern games. I really haven't been picking up as many new physicals as I usually do when it comes to a lot of new releases I'm excited for, and instead have been just very patient about which games I want to kind of add to my collection behind me in physical form. And it's also kind of make me a little bit more deliberate about which platform to buy a game for. And I think the word, I guess, to perfectly sum up my feelings towards the state of Switch collecting is just a little bit disheartened, because we have this brand new Switch 2 system that has a lot of great performance boosts and is just basically a Nintendo Switch Pro, which many of us were asking for. But it's really sad that a lot of physical games are just not being optimized for that system. Instead, we have to rely on the older software with physical Switch 1 games and hope that there's some sort of upgrade that can be made when using it with the Nintendo Switch 2 systems. And having no sort of upgrade path available for these games is just kind of a bummer. Now, there are plenty of Switch 1 games that did receive upgrade paths to Switch 2, such as the new Fantasy Live and the new Rune Factory game. And there are also a couple upcoming ones that are also going to be receiving them, such as Final Fantasy Tactics. But there's still quite a big question mark about some upcoming Switch 1 games and whether or not they'll be receiving some sort of upgrade path, such as the upcoming Trails Beyond the Horizon that just revealed a Switch 2 version. And I'm sure many more that have yet to be revealed. So hopefully most of the new Switch 1 games will have some sort of upgrade path available to them to become Switch 2 versions. But again, it's kind of still up in the air what's going to happen within the next year or so. So I'd love to hear how you guys feel about the state of Nintendo Switch collecting. Are you also feeling a bit disheartened right now like I am? Or are game key cards perfectly fine in your collection? I know that many collectors still enjoy the physical box and having the option for something that's tradable, which is perfectly fine. Just for me, I really like having ownership of the game that's on the cart and not having to rely on some sort of internet connection to access my games, even if it's just the one time. And I know that Nintendo recently released a survey in Japan asking about what the customers think about game key cards, but who knows what will come of that, and if some sort of maybe middle ground could be made when it comes to physical collecting and new Switch 2 games. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what Nintendo shares with us whenever they're ready to reveal their, solution or their plan moving forward. So I wanted to take some time to briefly mention that I started streaming here on YouTube as a way to supplement my long-form videos. And up next, we'll be streaming some sort of JRPG. Which one exactly will be decided by my channel members, which I also recently opened. So I have a couple different tiers with various perks, including helping me decide what games I want to stream next, and also some video making decisions. So I wanted to thank all those who recently joined and supported me through these memberships, and a big shout out to my Orbment architects, Dr. God and Calix. Your support means so much. You guys have a great day, and until my next video, bye guys.